HGBC data, they're saying 70%, over 70% of your electricity consumption is actually occurring in buildings. So that's where, one of the places where we have to focus is how are we living in the building, how are we running the building. So USGBC, most of you are probably familiar with the LEED program. This is where you're trying to make a more sustainable building. And although only one of the 5 focus areas says energy, if you really look at it, every area actually has some impact on energy. If you look at your sustainable sites, you're looking at how are we using vehicles, are we encouraging public transportation and hybrid vehicles for our site. If you look at water efficiency, we generally don't think about the power it takes to process the water and to get it out to us, but if you cut down on the amount you use, you're cutting down the energy usage there. When you look at materials and resources, what does it take to extract that raw material, to process it, and then depending on how much material you're using and how far away it is, how much energy are you actually using to transport those materials to your site? Looking at indoor environmental quality, this one's a little bit interesting because it has a little bit more of a push-pull. We're looking at people's well-being and being in a comfortable environment. We all want to be connected out to the outdoors. Sorry there are no windows here, but we want that. We want good clean air that's been well filtered. And so there are these things that go against our typical process for energy efficiency, but we have to look at how do we keep people healthy, and then what are the creative ways that we can contribute to indoor environmental quality that may actually help with energy, like using natural ventilation, actually being able to open the windows again, and actually giving people some individual control. All of that you need to look at and say, how do we integrate it? I think Bill mentioned the holistic, and I think you have to take the whole picture holistically. So here's an example with green roofs. So you're helping yourself with stormwater runoff, you're helping yourself with heat island effect, but you're also getting some really good insulation on your roof, so that actually helps with energy. When you look at your buildings, it's also not just what's the system I'm putting in. You have to look at your passive and active heating and cooling. How am I making this building or facility work with the site? What's my building envelope? How am I monitoring and controlling it? How am I operating it? And really importantly, how am I commissioning it? Because there's a lot of design that goes in, but we need a little more checking to make sure it's actually doing what was designed. So the next big thing that people are talking about is your high performance building. How do you meet the needs of what the clients ask for while getting high performance building? This example is where we have a hangar where we don't want people to be able to look in. So how do you get them the outside light? We've got overhangs, we've moved the windows up out of the sight line, we've put good insulation in, so we've got a good environmental building that looks nice, but also is considering energy.
At HOK, we try to take an integrated design approach, looking at how all systems function together to optimize efficiency. So if you take daylighting, for instance, if you allow the appropriate amount of light into a space, then you reduce the need for electrical lighting, which reduces heat generated, so you don't need as much cooling equipment, which saves costs, and overall you lessen your energy costs and usage. This is not a new concept by any means. Some of you may recognize this building on the left. It's in downtown St. Louis, and it's designed by renowned architect Louis Sullivan. And back at the turn of the century, this is how they designed buildings. They're very tall and narrow because they had to rely on operable windows to allow natural ventilation to flow through the space, so you didn't have the big open grand spaces like we have today. And this shallow floor plan also lent itself to daylighting. Now, we transfer these design ideas into building projects that we do today. This is a high-rise office building in Buenos Aires, and the building shape and size was designed in direct response to solar loads and orientation. So at its widest point, this building is about 60 feet across. And that's because we know that daylight can penetrate about 30 feet into a space. Now, daylighting does not necessarily mean all windows. We have to understand high-performance envelopes and window-to-wall ratio, and we have to integrate solar shading, as you can see on this facade, in order to reduce glare and solar heat gain. And this complemented with operable windows for natural ventilation reduces our dependency on mechanical systems, hence energy. So we've taken what we know about integrated design and vernacular design, and we've developed a net zero prototype building. So what is net zero? It seems to be a buzzword lately. Everybody's heard of it. Just to clarify, there are numerous types of net zero. A net zero energy building, for example, produces as much energy as it consumes on an annual basis. A net zero water building is essentially water independent. So it captures all rainwater, it manages stormwater runoff, and it also reuses gray water on site. Now, a net zero carbon building, which is what we have designed, is probably the most difficult to achieve because it uses absolutely no fossil fuels in production. So it creates no greenhouse gases and essentially does not contribute to global warming. So all of the energy that's used in this building is from clean, renewable sources. There are very few net zero buildings of any type in the US, just a handful. But at HOK, we wanted to learn more about it, so how better to do that than design one ourselves? The Earth was created about 4.5 billion years ago, and soon after, life began to exist about 3.8 billion years ago. And life has found ways to optimize existence in all regions and all climates around the world. No matter how harsh or extreme, life always finds a way. Nature behaves in ways that we can learn from. And Janine Benyus wrote a book about this in 1997 called Biomimicry, Innovation Inspired by Nature. Hopefully some of you are familiar with this. Soon after, she co-founded the Biomimicry Guild, which is an innovation consultancy. And today, HOK and the Biomimicry Guild have an exclusive alliance linking the natural and built environments. And through this relationship, HOK is integrating nature's innovations into our planning and design of buildings and communities and cities around the world. So we literally bring a biologist to the design table to broaden our perspective, and the outcome has been eye-opening, to say the least.